Welcome to Ignite, where we explore the ideas and resources that help you ignite your business, leadership, and personal growth. With me today is Jacob Green, who is a nationally recognized leadership and organizational development expert. After 18 years in local government executive positions, Jacob then transitioned to the private sector, where he served as managing director of a national government consulting firm. And now he runs Jacob Green and Associates, where clients both in the public sector and the Fortune 500 list bring Jacob in to help their teams leverage adversity and build organizational resilience, which we're going to hear more about today. Okay, his new book right here. Let me get this up. Yeah, so you can see it. See change clearly. Has just reached, and this is a new book, has reached #1 in 5 Amazon new release business categories, which is actually a big deal. Jacob, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's great, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about. We can talk about the book, but also most importantly, would love to hear what led you to write this book and the contents that are in there. And can you start us off there?
Yeah. Well, thank you. So, I don't think we'd be talking. I don't think there'd be a book. I don't think I'd be in the position I'm in right now working with companies if it wasn't for the experience that I had in college. The second semester of my freshman year, I walked into a robbery taking place at the downtown Berkeley BART station. A gentleman had broken into the glass ticket booth and was attacking 2 subway workers. And when I tried to distract his attention and intervene, I was struck over the head 4 or 5 times. And that's about all I remember from that night. And everything really changed at that moment. I had to drop out of college. I first entered a 6-month full-time rehabilitation program where I had speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, neurology, neuropsychology, 5 days a week full-time. At the end of that 6-month period, the doctor said, you're not going back to an academic environment like Berkeley any longer. You need to go to a trade school. But before we send you to trade school, you have to learn how to learn all over again because the brain injury was definitely an impediment to learning new skills, learning new abilities. So I had to move down to Southern California. I entered a cognitive rehabilitation program, a 2-year school for those with brain injuries, essentially. And that program, I learned how to learn again. And very slowly but surely learned how to, read things and remember things, and essentially cognitive retraining from top to bottom. The brain injury rehabilitation program, towards the end of that program, I got to cash in on one of the best gifts that I've ever been given from anybody. It was the University of California gave me a letter when I dropped out of college. And the letter said, if it took a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years to get back to school, I could cash it in, bypass the admissions process, and go to any school that I wanted. So UC Irvine was just a few miles away from my rehab center, cashed it in. And I have the record for the most number of years it's taken someone to get their bachelor's degree. But after 8.5 years, I got my bachelor's degree, got my master's degree in public administration, and went back to work. And what I realized, in that process of rehabilitation is really I spent 2.5 years full-time learning how to navigate change, learning how to overcome challenges, but really create compensatory strategies for things that come up. And I had one single thought while I was going through rehab, which was, please let these lessons, let what I'm going through not just kind of be in vain. I didn't want to just waste 2.5 years of my life. I wanted them to mean something at some point, someday. And so the lessons from brain injury became the basis for things that I applied in the workplace. And then I realized that those lessons don't just apply to me in the workplace and in companies. These lessons of building resilience and navigating change could actually apply to just about every company all over the world. And that's when I started working with companies and organizations to help them, without going to brain injury school, help them learn how to navigate some of these big organizational and people challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's quite a story, and I have heard this story. You and I know each other, so I've been able to have some conversations with you about this, and it's been incredibly inspiring to me. And what I love too is also your transition out of this, out of sort of through rehab and into, okay, now what? Right, sort of navigating that change, and then getting into the public sector. I wonder if you could share a little bit about how you navigated that change.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I went to college to be a diplomat. I was going to be in this working for the State Department. I got into Berkeley's international relations program. That's what I was off to do, off to study. And, again, everything changed with the brain injury. After getting back to UC Irvine, I really want to make my way back into the public sector. And I chose local government because I think local government was an amazing way to make a direct impact. And I started slowly growing in local government into executive positions. In my last 6 years in local government, I was working in the field of city management, and decided that these lessons and these tools and resources applied much more broadly. So I wrote the book, started speaking, and then essentially I hit a fork in the road, and I had to decide, did I want to stay on a city management track, or did I want to try to really leverage what I had learned to continue to work with companies and organizations and apply the lessons from the private sector, helping the private and the public sector? And that's what I chose.
So that in and itself, I mean, that's kind of a risk. You that choice that you made, right? How did it share with us a little bit about how you felt about, I mean, that was a big risk.
Yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah. Thank you for recognizing that, because my wife would totally agree with you. And we have 4 little kids, and major risk. I think everybody thought I was lost my mind in some sort of crisis period, that I would leave the pension, that I would walk away from the security of the government sector, which I loved and everybody knows I love. But, I really focused during the rehabilitation process on trying to create some sort of meaning and purpose out of what I was going through. I was reminded by my mentor, one of my mentors is Bill Holloman-Daris. And Bill had reminded me of a book written by his mentor. His mentor was Viktor Frankl, Dr. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, which is an international bestseller. And essentially, Dr. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist and a neurologist who was born in 1905 in Austria, and by 1938 finds himself in the concentration camps in Dachau and in Auschwitz. And Dr. Viktor Frankl is trying to study in the world around him, in this world of atrocity and suffering and pain, who is thriving, who is living. And he would take little notes on little scraps of paper that he would find throughout the camp, and he'd use coal that he found throughout the camp, and take little notes as an academic, as an observer. And when the camps were liberated, and he was ultimately liberated, he survived, the scraps of paper also survived. And those scraps of paper became a national bestseller, Man's Search for Meaning. And he says 2 very important things in the book that resonated for me and led me to make that decision to transition and to try to create more impact. The first thing that he said that resonated for me was, quote, "Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except for one thing, the freedom to choose how you'll respond to the situation." And so Bill reminded me that in this rehab process where things were pretty dark and there wasn't a lot of hope, that I had a choice. And the choice that I could make was to respond and to try to make some sort of sense and some sort of impact with that which I was going through. And the second thing that Dr. Viktor Frankl says is, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. And so I had done 18 years in the public sector, and I loved the public sector. I loved being an executive in the public sector, but I was ready to make more impact. And I wanted to continue to work with organizations, public and private, nationally, to apply some of these really important lessons that I had learned so that other folks didn't have to go through the challenge, And I could really feel a sense of purpose by reapplying that which I had gone through and that which I had spent 2.5 years trying to relearn. And so it wasn't that I had any dislike for the public sector. I loved it, but I really wanted to leverage those lessons and try to make greater impact. And so I took that other path. And here we are. And it's been almost 5 years, and I'm incredibly grateful for all the incredible companies and people that I've been able to work with since then.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great. I'm glad you brought in Viktor Frankl and that quote about the freedom to choose how you respond. And but let's be real. I mean, you share this so eloquently and beautifully. Were there times that seemed very difficult for you? I mean, you say you chose, how you wanted to respond. So how, maybe share with us a little bit about how you were mentally when you decided to choose. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, and again, choosing to go to the private sector from the public sector, I wasn't at a bad period in life. I was in a really dark period in life in about the second year of rehabilitation. I mean, that's when things got really dark. That's when I questioned moving on. That's when I questioned, I'm going from a college campus, an internationally renowned college campus, Berkeley, to literally my brain injury school was on an elementary school campus. And I'm sitting in those little slightly lowered chairs.
No.
And I'm looking out the glass at the third graders and the fourth graders and the fifth graders that are running around at their recess while I'm in a classroom now in Southern California, learning how to do things all over again. And not an easy place to be, but again, I had incredible mentors, I had incredible guides, and when things became most difficult, it was really that connection with Dr. Viktor Frankl. It was really that my life is really challenging right now because I don't have purpose and I'm lacking meaning. And the world has changed around me and things are ambiguous and things are challenging. And what I really need is purpose. And I happen to find my purpose. This doesn't need to be the case for everyone, but I found my purpose thanks to Bill. He challenged me to go out and do some volunteer work. And it was in that volunteer work, and you can read those stories in the book. You can see what happened when I went out and did volunteer work. I was helping others, but really I was helping myself. I was finding purpose. And it started me thinking about, wow, how could this be applicable outside of the world of brain injury? Well, it turns out that people become hopeless when they lack purpose and when they lack an understanding of where they're headed. And that is really applicable in organizations. Because
absolutely,
you start having employee issues, you start having personnel cases, you start having attrition when people feel like they don't understand the meaning and the purpose and the vision and the direction of the organization. And so I really started thinking a lot about this and how these insights in my own life could actually apply to a larger context.
Yeah, that's so, I love how you were able to take this experience and apply it so specifically. And it's so accurate too. I mean, everybody needs purpose. Everybody needs purpose, even at work. And so maybe there's share with us a little bit about, maybe you can give us an example of a situation where you discovered that, or you were able to work with an organization to develop purpose within the organization.
There's so many really exciting examples of companies that really, what I say the shift is, it's understanding purpose and shifting that into alignment. Building alignment in your company is really powerful for the retention of employees and building a really connected workforce. I'll try to keep a little bit anonymous, but I can think of an organization. We sort of have a 3-part approach when we look at building alignment. The first part is doing an organizational assessment, understanding what people are feeling. The CEO, the executives need to understand what people are saying and what people are feeling in their organizations. So the first step that we do is a 90-day organizational assessment to help companies, primarily CEOs and C-suite executives, understand what's taking place in their company. The second phase that we move into then is taking those insights and information and creating a very simple roadmap or a strategic plan, something that builds alignment in the organization. So now we know where we're going. We know the purpose of what we're doing and what we're doing to get there. And the third element is breaking down barriers and removing silos between departments and divisions and entities so we can get there together. And we do that in the form of team building or alignment building between people and organizations. And the greatest joy for me is seeing companies that are talking about issues that they've never talked about before because they surfaced in the organizational assessment. And they finally begin to conquer these issues and work together towards, a common vision. Companies and organizations that were once being really competitive, where they were competing for resources between departments or divisions, now aligned and working towards a common goal. And so, that's really what this whole journey has been about. That's what I learned in brain injury school. In brain injury school, it was about, doing the organizational assessment on the brain, which means you figure out where your deficits are, where your challenges are, where the landmines are, step one. Step two, creating a strategic plan or a vision, giving yourself purpose and where we're heading and where you're going. That helps the brain injury patient feel restored and get that energy back. Companies need to do the same thing. And the third thing is breaking down those barriers and doing some sort of team building, which is what they did in brain injury school. They finally get you out in the world and they build those relationships and they create connections and they allow people to feel empowered that they can execute that vision, that roadmap, and move forward together. So, it's this really three-step process: that organizational assessment, the strategic plan, and the team building side that I have found can be real advantageous and real helpful for companies that are trying to get through some difficult things. And let me just share one more element of this, which is maybe a tip that I have for your viewers. I know, CEOs are going to be watching this and really trying to learn from you and understand what they can do to immediately help their organizations. The process of building resilience means you're willing to learn from that which you have been through. You're willing to share the stories of brain injury and write about those things in hopes that you build a muscle so that you can face whatever it is coming in the future. And I think a lot of companies right now are so sick and tired and burned out from COVID, they don't even want to say the word COVID, right? We're done. We got burnout. We just want to move forward. That makes me really anxious inside. Because if I negate the 2.5 years of full-time rehab that I went through, and I don't bring those lessons to my team and my current company and my workplace, I'm missing out on the ability to build a really resilient team and a really resilient organization. So one of the immediate things that teams and companies can do to build resilience and start to create alignment moving forward together is grab the lessons learned. Grab the things from COVID that worked well, grab the things that didn't work so well, and make sure those are discussed and talked about and leveraged so that those things can be applied to whatever it is we hit in the future, moving forward. It's the easiest way to build resilience. We all went through this experience together, but so few companies are actually willing to take a breath and say, let's reflect back and try to figure out what it is that we've been through. So in this process of assessing and building resilience and understanding us, I think a really quick way to build some great resilience muscle is to spend 15 minutes at your next executive meeting, your next C-suite meeting, and just talk about what you've been through and what you've learned and how you're going to move forward together.
I think that's terrific advice. I love that, and I thank you for sharing all of that. I as we think about the CEOs that are sitting here listening to this, that you're talking to, that we're both talking to, I wonder, this is a time where change and dramatic changes like a COVID and remote working and currently we're dealing with recession and inflation, right? So where these changes seem to be, it's a little bit like a whack-a-mole out there, right? Like it's just once you've solved one, another one pops up, and it seems a little relentless, is what I'm hearing and noticing from the CEOs that I'm talking to. So I'm wondering what you would say to them. You just gave us a great example, but what else might you say to them about navigating this relentless change?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy, you bring up about 4 hours of things I
I
could
know,
share,
right?
right?
And you have 30 seconds,
I
Jacob.
have
No, I'm just
32
kidding.
seconds, 32 seconds.
No.
Okay. So the first thing, I think you tapped into something really important, which is not only are CEOs tired and CEOs going through a lot of change, but the teams that work for the CEOs, the executive teams, the employees are also tired. And you don't always have to have the answer as the CEO to how to fill those tanks. You don't have to have all the solutions to how to keep your team members motivated and engaged and able to withstand the rockiness and the ambiguity that we're in right now. The key is you have the opportunity to listen. And 99% of the time, if you listen through the organizational assessment process, through asking good questions and doing surveys and having the discussions, if you listen, the solutions of what your people need in order to be there for you will literally be on the paper in front of you. So a lot of CEOs, I think, feel overwhelmed by how am I going to solve this? How am I going to help my people? How am I going to keep their tanks full? What incentives do I have to put in place? What bonuses do I have to put in place? What do I have to do? And what we always say is, let's hear from the employees. Let's listen. Let's conduct an organizational assessment. Let's listen to their voices because they may have the ideas and be able to make your job a lot easier if you just hear what they think the solutions might be. They may be free. They may be easy to implement. They may be a lot less complicated than you and your brain at 2 o'clock in the morning are thinking about. So number one, I would say listen to what your employees need right now in order to survive this rocky and challenging and ever-changing period. And number two would be what I talk about in my book. At the end of the book is really having a confidant, a partner, a confidential partner in your company that is looking out for you, not for their own interests, but for your best interests. That means they're looking out for your mental health. That means they're looking out for your decision-making acumen. That means they are providing you the guidance that nobody else will. And so we share in the book a little bit about sitting down with that person and establishing some guidelines so that you can survive and be successful as a CEO in your company. You need someone looking out for you because it's lonely at the top. And your audience knows that very well, and especially right now where things change so quickly.
Yeah, very, very, so true. In fact, I noticed in your book that one of the chapters is called Lonely at the Top.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you talk about having a confident, and many of you know that I run CEO peer groups in partnership with Vistage. And that is another way for you, the CEOs that are listening today, to have that confident, a group of people that's only interested in your best interests. So reach out to me if you want to hear more about that. Jacob, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to give a shameless plug for that because as a CEO myself with a team and finding it very lonely at the top, Vistage has been an absolute game changer in my professional career, in my life. It's given me a place where I can talk about things, find those confidants, and get guidance and direction from the chair, from the Vistage chair, which is what Tane does. And so I highly recommend, I know your audience is primarily CEOs, for those not connected in some sort of group. Vistage is the one that I feel was a great match for me, but some kind of environment, I'm a huge fan, and thank you for what you do to help the rest of us not feel so lonely in our companies and our environments.
Well, I got to say, it is for me, it's a real privilege and a joy to walk side by side leaders and navigate some of these changes that you're going through. So it's a real joy. Jacob, thank you for being here with us today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to hearing what comes next for you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye.